we'll be talking about requirements management. Last week, we talked about requirement elicitation, how we gather requirements from the stakeholders and how we get to define those requirements, validate the requirements, make sure it falls it falls and aligns with the business objective. Yeah, and we spoke a lot about requirement elicitation and how we can use that to influence the products we are working on and how and techniques by Babok standard, techniques such as interviews, surveys, um, group, right, community that you form of groups, and stakeholder interviews, workshop, and so on and so forth. Requirement management is a systematic process of capturing, organizing, and tracking requirements to ensure they are met throughout a project life cycle, right? So it basically it's a concept to having a systematic process to capture and organize and especially to track requirements to ensure that they meet the project life cycle. It is very, very important. Anything outside the scope of the project is a waste. It can be in form of resources, time, and we all know how expensive time and resources can be. So it is very, very important that whilst we work towards requirement elicitation by gathering requirements to build a product, it is very important that we should manage our requirements to ensure that they meet the project life cycle throughout the project development phase. Yeah, and the gathering phase before it gets to the development phase. So or we um we have other requirements under requirements management that we're going to look at, and which is we have choose requirements, maintain requirements, prioritize requirements, access requirements, and approve requirements. So these are like the fundamental requirements under requirement management that are important to note, right? They are very, very important too. It makes us have a guide and scope throughout our project life cycle. So if we're going to talk about trees requirements, it's it's basically the requirements that involve creating a lineage or relationship map that links each requirement to other project artifacts such as business objective, system designs, test cases, and so much more. So this concept I just listed here now may be may sound quite advanced, but as we proceed, they are going to become clearer. And the purpose for trace requirements are ensure coverage because it helps ensure all requirements are addressed in the design, implementation, and testing phase. So moving forward, the purpose of trace requirements it facilitates understanding and impact of changes to requirements on other project components, right? That is how impact it can give on the project. And it also ensures accountabilities, looked at, right? Um, it tracks the fulfillment of requirements, ensuring nothing is overlooked or omitted. So accountability is one of the key purpose for choose requirement. And to just give an insight of how or of what choose requirement is all about. So imagine you are building, you are working for an e-commerce website, and you have gathered the requirement. You and I will both agree that it is important that user creates an account before they make purchases, so we can track the users, flow or activity on the platform, right? So what are the links here? We have a user would create an account, which that can stand as a requirement. User is going to add items to carts, which is also another requirement. And users are going to buy the item, which is also another requirement. Can you see how linked they are? Like the relationship from how a user creates an account to how the user add an item to the cart and how the user pays for the item. So that is like a concept of trace requirement. So again, it ensures coverage. It impact analysis facilitates understanding on the project components, and it also facilitates accountability as well. It fosters accountability. And the techniques is basically traceable matrix, a document that maps requirements to their origin and related artifacts. And we also have another software tool that we can use to trace requirements, tools like Jira. So this tracing is quite broad, and the flow of this business analysis program, which will be touching project management to some extent, it is going to give us the opportunity to touch and expand our knowledge on what choose requirement is all about. So moving forward, we're going to learn how to use Jira to track and manage requirements. And on to number two, we have maintain requirements. We have maintain requirements. Maintaining requirements involves creating the requirements up to date and relevant throughout the project lifecycle. So imagine you are trying to build a feature, and I'm thinking of a typical example. Imagine you are trying to build a feature and you are thinking you are building a solution, right? A software. You have options of using networking in terms of network, right? I'm trying to find a lay a layman example, right? So now imagine you'll be working with network types. Network type in this context, we have 2G, 3G, and 4G. So and we are to incorporate a network type in the system of what we are working on. And imagine we don't have, okay, imagine currently now we are on 5G. Yeah, it means our system will be built based on that 5G network. But before the end of the project, 7G is already out, and other products are moving and upgrading to 7G. What do you want to do to stay relevant, to make your project be relevant when it is out? So you want to make sure that you update what has been done. Even let's assume the feature has not been implemented, and you guys have already had it in plan that you'll be implementing 5G, and now everybody is using 7G. It means you have to adjust and replan to to using the 7G. Right? I believe that example is clear enough. So basically, it ensures consistency right? So it's actually requirement that reflect the current understanding of the project's need and constraints. And based on relevance, it adapts to changes in project scope, stakeholders' need, or external conditions. And we also want to make sure that whilst we are communicating with the stakeholder, we are able to um, use their needs, tailor their needs to update and adjust to what we are building, right? So we would all be on the same page, both you, the business analyst, and the stakeholder. And basically, for documentation, it keeps requirements documentation accurate and current, facilitating ongoing communication and alignment. So, number three, you must know that prioritizing requirements involves ranking them based on factors such as their importance, right? So we have other factors we might look into, but prioritizing requirements is one of the key requirement under maintenance requirement management that you must have in your arsenal. You can't build everything at once, right? So I mentioned three requirements to which a user can buy a product or an item from an e-commerce store we are building, e-commerce website store we are building. Are you with me, guys? Right. Okay. So prioritizing requirements, like I say, it involves ranking requirement based on some factors, right? And I mentioned three features earlier, which are also requirements. A user would create an account, and a user would add items to cart. A user would then purchase that item, right? So let's look at these three requirements in isolation. In the course of starting the project, um, would it be smart for us to start working on the purchase features? Obviously, no. So we want to work on the authentication flow first, which entails the um, login and sign up, creating of accounts, and everything that involve the model of authentication. And once that stage or requirement phase, which is in kind of a model, we are going to look into modeling requirement later, right? But before then, the concept of model requirement is you have some requirements that are similar and they work in the same system, right? So you might want to categorize them in a model, right? So any requirement that falls between payments, so you want to put it in payment mode, or any requirement that falls between signing up, creating an account, which is authentication, you want to put it in authentication model. So that's like a quick overview of model, right? So prioritizing requirements, you want to ensure that you're done with the authentication before working on the feature to allow user to add items to cart, right? So like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to start from a user purchasing an item and then moving on to a user um, I'm thinking of another features again that e-commerce has, and moving on to showcasing items, whereas there are important features that can be prioritized. So we have factors such as their importance to the stakeholder, the cost, how feasible can they be, and the impact on the project. So let's look at the impact on of a user creating an account. Basically, we want to be able to send our users notifications so they can get updated with our current product and item. That is our new arrival product, right? It is very important that the user signs up or create an account, right? So you can see how impactful these requirements can be, and users should be able to purchase too as well. So the gist here is a requirement needs to be worked on before moving on to another requirement, and there is a sequence things must follow, right? So purpose actually is involves resource allocation, the stakeholder alignment, and risk management. So building or working on a particular requirement, you want to focus on high priority items that are crucial for the project success and mitigate risk associated with lower priorities items. We have techniques you can use to work on this, which is like MOSCO method to categorize requirements into must have, should have, could have, and won't have. This is a framework to know what you must work before moving on to another requirement. So you're working on an e-commerce store, right? And we have I asked features we can found on e-commerce store. Um, User or customer should be able to buy a product. So customer should be able to add an item to cart, and let's keep it with the customer. Customer should be able to view product description. Customer should be able to use coupon. I pray I'm correct with the spelling. Coupon codes. So customers should be able to refer users user and customer. Let's stop here. Should be able to create an account. So now we have all these requirements. We have requirements, right? And we've validated these requirements, and they can go into the development phase and start working on the project. So now, firstly, we can't work on all these at once. We must work on a feature at a time, right? And we might also achieve this by using prototyping, right? To further validate what we have from the stakeholders, right? So, how do we prioritize these requirements? So, What does Moscow method taught us, right? What does it entail? Moscow method is basically an ideology which it's actually an acronym Moscow, but it's what we know as must have, should have, we have, could have, and won't have. So, we want to prioritize your requirements based on this method. So, which features can you do without? Yeah, and which features you must have on your website. So user must be able to create an account, right? It doesn't matter if a user refers a customer or a customer refers a user, right? So I can always reach out people through my ads and other platforms, right? It doesn't matter if I should have this. So basically, you want to start with your must have. So what are your must have features you can't do without to build your product or to build your project? You must create an account. Your customer must be able to add items to cart, and your customer should also be able to purchase your product at the end of the day. So those three falls among your must have. So now which one is now nice to have? Which one is should have? Okay. It would be nice to have. I should be able to. Customers should be able to view product description. Customers should be able to use coupon codes, right? And which one can follow that could have? Okay, let customer be able to refer. Well, refer to can also be an important feature, right? And which one fall amongst won't have if we had enough requirements, because in a typical work environment you won't be working with just five. So this is just to give a quick illustration and how you can use Moscow to prioritize your requirements when working on a project, right? There's also requirements involved, right? So how does it give us clarity and help us in alignment with our business goals towards projects and products we are working on? So assessing requirements involves evaluating their clarity, feasibility, how feasible they can be, and alignment with the business goals before they are approved for development. So the purpose, like I mentioned, how feasible it can be, how clear and precise are your requirements, and does it align to the business objective and stakeholders' needs. It is very important that the requirements aligns with the business objective as well as the stakeholders' need. Okay. Yeah. So the activities requires reviews, which is conducting formal or informal review session with stakeholder. No, time to time checkup to ensure you have an updated documentation, right? And you want to ensure your requirements are they accurately reflect the needs that they are meant to address. So on to number five, we have approved requirements. Approving requirements is the process of formally validating and accepting requirements as ready for implementation. And the purpose for this is commitment. How does it establish a baseline, right? Because in terms of deliverables, how can we track the progress against what we have, the scope of the project you are trying to build. So baseline, having a baseline on what you are approving establishes a baseline again for what will be delivered against which progress can be measured. And scope control prevents scope creep by clearly defining what it is included in the project. Again, I remember making emphasizes on what scope creep can be, and it's basically an unending loop. You find yourself just gathering requirements, not having a well-defined scope of when to start the project and how long the project can take and how long each features can also take. So that is why the baseline is necessary so you can measure the progress of your deliverables of each task. And basically, effective requirements management ensures that project requirements are properly traced, maintained, prioritized, assessed, and approved. As you can see on our slide, these activities help align project outcomes with stakeholder expectations, mitigate risk, and ensure efficient use of resources. I mentioned earlier that it is very, very important that we are all on the same page as regards to the stakeholders' need and the business goals and objectives, because you don't want to waste resources and time, and we can't get time back. They are like the most expensive things we can lose. So that is why it is very, very important that we have a guide to put us on track on achieving a successful project, right? So by following structured methodologies and leveraging appropriate tools, which we'll be looking into Jira tools and Confluence in the next coming class, business analysts can enhance the clarity, feasibility, and overall success of your project, right? So that's it on requirements management. And let me see if I can briefly brush validate requirements, because it is important that whilst you gather requirements, you must be able to validate your requirement. And with Moscow is a method which can also be used interchangeably to validate your requirements. And according to what we have on our slide here, what is requirement validation? Requirement validation is the process of ensuring that the requirements gathered for a project are correct, complete, feasible, and aligned with the stakeholders' need and business objective. So, um, requirement validation. So I said it's a process that ensures that requirements that are gathered for a project are correct, complete, feasible, and they are aligned with the stakeholders' need and business objective. This process involves checking that the requirements accurately represent and the the intended functionality, and that they are practical to implement. So the importance of requirement validation includes accuracy and completeness, feasibility, stakeholder alignment, risk mitigation, and quality assurance. And accuracy and completeness is basically um, a flow and process that ensures that requirements correctly reflect what the stakeholder needs, and the completeness makes sure all necessary requirements are identified and documented, avoiding missing elements that could cause issues later. And feasibility, as you can see on our slide again, it confirms that is, we have two types of feasibility: technical feasibility and resource feasibility. And technical feasibility confirms that the requirements can be technical implemented within the constraints of the project. And resource feasibility ensures that the organization has enough resources like time, budget, personnel to meet the requirement. And stakeholder alignment, like I mentioned, it's very important that the stakeholder is satisfied, and want to look at the state of consensus, which ensures all stakeholders agree on the requirement, reducing the risk of misunderstanding and conflict later in the project is very important. That is why, as you gather requirements, as you refine, validate, you are also working with all your stakeholders. Like I mentioned, consensus would make all the stakeholders that are involved in this project to agree with what you're doing. And basically, it is to reduce the risk. You want to make sure that you want to reduce the risk of misunderstanding as a business analyst. It is not a good um, outcome of a project you are working on. And your stakeholders must also be satisfied. This increases stakeholder satisfaction by delivering a solution that meets their needs and expectation. So risk mitigation, basically early detection, identifies potential issues early in project lifecycle. So it's basically allowing for timely correction and adjustment, just like I mentioned earlier with the example of 5G and 7G concept. And it also reduced the work. And quality assurance. This ensures consistency and traceability. So requirement validation is a crucial state and step in ensuring that project requirements are accurate, complete, and feasible. By involving stakeholders,